found yourself in a position where you're getting annoyed at somebody, you're feeling angry, you're feeling frustrated, you're feeling resentful, you can feel it bubbling up inside of you, and then you say something sarcastic, you say something passive aggressive, and you end up regretting it later. I know I've been in that position, and that is so common, especially if you're a people pleaser, because we just don't have the communication tools to be assertive and say what we really think. So in this video, I'm going to be teaching you some communication strategies to stop being passive aggressive, especially if you're a people pleaser. If we haven't met before, I'm Dr. Sarah. I'm a medical doctor and an online coach. And if you are a healthcare professional, you are going to want to hear about the Thriving Medics Club, a group coaching program that I've recently started that is especially for healthcare professionals who are in survival mode. I will link it down below so you can check out all the details. So the other day, I went live on Instagram. I was talking about people pleasing, and I had a comment from a nurse who said that she'd recently had a promotion and she was finding herself becoming more passive aggressive at work and she didn't know how to handle it. For people pleasers, this is surprisingly common. Why do people pleasers find it hard to strike the balance between being overly kind and accepting and passive versus suddenly flipping and becoming aggressive or passive aggressive? We'll dive into all of that in this video. Okay, so to understand this problem a little more, we first of all have to understand the difference between passive communication, assertive, aggressive, and passive aggressive. Passive communication is when you're overly accepting. You basically let people walk all over you. You don't want to make decisions. You let everyone else do the deciding and you're just okay with everything. Assertive communication is when you're direct, you say what you really mean, and you are clear about that. Aggressive communication is when we are rude, we're confrontational, we often use threats or manipulation to get what we want. And passive aggression is kind of in between, when we use sarcasm, snarky comments, rude behind somebody's back. We do things to subtly hinder other people without being honest about it. If you're a people pleaser, you are probably the kind of person who was brought up to be polite. You were brought up thinking that the best thing you could be was liked, to be kind, to be polite. Perhaps you even were taught to suppress your emotions. It wasn't okay for you to express any kind of emotion in your household. You're actually putting on a bit of a show. You're not acting with full integrity. You're not really being yourself. If you're a people pleaser and someone's really annoying you and you get to a point where you're like, enough is enough, I need to say something, not used to communicating what we really think, you resort to passive aggression. Really try to be assertive. You try to say that you're annoyed, or you try to say that you're feeling a bit resentful about something, but you have a hard time being totally honest about what's going on inside you, and you don't necessarily act with full integrity. So instead of being direct, you choose snarky or sarcastic comments, or you talk about that person behind their back. This is not a healthy place to be. This is not helpful for you or the other people involved. That you snap, you lose your cool, and you just go full out aggressive. I was on a coaching call with somebody once who described this feeling as a rage attack. They told me that they keep going, suppress their emotions, tell everyone that they're fine, and then boom, they are in full-on aggressive rage attack mode. It feels uncontrollable. You feel like a volcano exploding. All this pressure, all these suppressed emotions just come out. What's the solution to all of this? Learning to communicate assertively. Assertive communication is when we're totally honest, we're direct, we act with integrity. Basically, your thoughts and feelings are aligned with what you're actually saying. If you think about when you're acting passively and you're saying, I don't mind, really, you probably do have a preference and you do mind, but you're just not saying it. You're not being fully honest. And you might be thinking to yourself at this point, I don't want to appear rude, I don't want to appear aggressive or pushy or anything else along those lines. And a helpful reframe around this is, when I communicate what I need and what I really think, I am not being rude, pushy, or aggressive. I am being honest. There are ways to do this effectively, calmly, and keeping your composure. Okay, so let's dig in to this juicy example. Keeping this nurse anonymous, she said that it was a super busy shift on the ward that she's on. And bear in mind, she just had a promotion, so she may be in this new leadership role. And on this particularly busy shift, there was a colleague of hers that was just being downright lazy, and even made a comment about how lazy they were being. She felt like she enabled their lazy day. Okay, and then when handover came around and they were handing over to the night team, this colleague of hers had the audacity to say, "We haven't stopped all day." At that point, the nurse got really annoyed and made a snarky comment. She said, "Yeah, well, busy day you had, wasn't it?" And then gave this colleague a death stare. Okay, all of this is so understandable, and I can see it happening in real time. I could totally visualize this situation. I'm sure you can as well. We've all either been part of situations like this or seen them play out. It's really natural to resort to passive aggression when you're in this kind of situation, but there are much better ways of handling this, and I want to show you in this video. So what would be a better way to handle this? Let's talk about 4 steps to dealing with situations like this that you can remember in future scenarios. You might want to take some notes, or perhaps you want to save this video for later. Okay, the first step is viewing yourself as a leader. Okay, if you are somebody who is a people pleaser and you're currently viewing yourself as a passive person, you're the kind of person that just accepts everything, this needs to change. You are stepping out of your people pleasing role and stepping into a leader role. And a leader does not communicate with passive aggression. Okay, so in this situation, I don't know if this colleague of this nurse was in a junior position to her, if she was managing them, or if they were somebody of an equal level to her or even above. But she did mention that she's recently had a promotion. The reason that I mention this is because when you change roles and you step into a promotion or start a new job with more responsibility, it can be really hard to adapt to that new identity. I know that I found this when I first changed from being a medical student to being a junior doctor. And when you step into that role of being a leader, you have to change the way that you behave. You set the tone. You help the people around you understand what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And passive aggression is never the way to do this. It's not effective, and it just causes divide between people. When you can start to view yourself as a leader, accept responsibility for the tone that you're setting, opening up the lines to healthy communication and respect between you and the other person, you're clearly showing people what's acceptable and what's not. Okay, so that's step 1, viewing yourself as a leader and stepping into this new identity. Step 2 is acknowledging what you're feeling. So really just taking a moment to check in with yourself, be like, hey, I'm super annoyed right now. This is really peeing me off. This person is making me angry. This situation is making me feel resentful. And the reason this step is so important is because if you are a people pleaser, chances are you have ignored your emotions for a long time. You've either suppressed those emotions or it hasn't been okay for you to outwardly express them. So it is all very new to you. I always say to coaching clients, recognizing and noticing your emotions is so important because they are clues. So even if you're feeling angry or sad, disappointed, resentful, jealous, we try and naturally push away those feelings because they don't feel very comfortable, but they're clues. And if you ignore those clues, then they're just going to bubble up in other areas of your life and you need to deal with them. Follow what that clue is telling you. Listen to what it is trying to get you to do. Those uncomfortable feelings are telling you that a change needs to happen, and you, as a leader, get to make that change. Okay, step 3, pause and breathe. Take a moment to just compose yourself, deep breaths. You do not need to respond or act straight away. I know when I was coming out of my people pleaser era, it took me a long time to get to a point where I was comfortable having these kind of confrontational conversations. I definitely needed a long pause and a long time to just calm myself and get to a point where I was comfortable to have those discussions. Just take a few moments to yourself to just be calm and breathe. Be with your thoughts. If you can't respond in a calm, assertive way straight away, then it's always better to wait, compose yourself, revisit the conversation when you've had a chance to think about it, rather than exploding or saying something that you might regret later, especially in a professional scenario. This pause is so helpful in so many situations, even in your closest relationships. I know I've had times where I've thought, I really just want to shout at Vince or, say something that I might regret later. And actually, it's always better to just calm myself, compose, take myself off for a little bit, and then revisit that conversation later. I always feel glad that I didn't say something that I might regret. Step 4, decide what you're going to say. Now, this is probably the hardest step of them all. This part is really important and it is so vital that you are direct. As people pleasers, we have a tendency to communicate through hints, subtext, reading between the lines. We don't always say what we really mean. We assume that people are going to pick up on what we're really trying to say. And I cannot stress this enough. This is not fair. This is not fair. This is not a good way to communicate. No one can read minds. You shouldn't expect other people to. Not fair on you or the people you're communicating with. If you want to overcome people pleasing and be an effective leader, you've got to learn to communicate only with direct communication. And by that, I mean you only deal with what is actually said. This takes a while to get used to, but I promise you this will be life-changing. So by this, I mean it has to be super clear to anyone who is listening to what you're saying exactly what you're meaning. And the same goes for other people speaking to you. Only deal with what is directly said. If someone says something with some subtext or some subtlety to it, ask them to clarify what they mean. Only deal with directly what has been said. If someone says something that could have multiple meanings, or they say something snarky or sarcastic, ask them calmly to clarify what they really mean. So for instance, in this example, there are lots of options of what you could say to this colleague who's being lazy. Here are some examples. Hey, I noticed you've been lacking in energy today. Is everything okay? If it is, I'd really appreciate you putting in a bit more work to today's shift, please. Another option, hey, can we talk for a moment? The workload on the ward is really high today and I feel like I'm taking the majority of the work. Would you mind please taking a look at the jobs list and allocating yourself half of those jobs? Okay, and if you're at a point where you can't manage to have that conversation at the time, maybe you're feeling too frustrated, maybe there isn't time, maybe you can't compose yourself, it's totally okay to wait, pause for longer, and have this conversation at a later time, at the end of the shift or the next day even. Just privately ask that person if you can have a conversation one-on-one. It's always better to communicate only with that person. So for example, you could pull them aside at the end of the shift and say, look, I noticed you were having a low energy day today and I just wanted to talk to you about this. It's really hard for the team to function effectively if one person isn't pulling their weight. Is there something you're struggling with? I want to help as best as I can. And then round off that conversation with, if you're having a hard day in the future, could you please flag that to me at the start of the shift so I can help as best as possible? I want the workload to be shared fairly amongst the team. Okay, so hopefully that has been helpful to you if you are somebody who's a people pleaser who has struggled with passive-aggressive communication before. So I've got a couple of bonus tips for you that have really helped me when it comes to communicating assertively. So the first is imagine somebody who is really charismatic, like have a clear picture in your mind. It could be a character from a film or someone you know in real life. Doesn't matter who it is, but pick someone who you would aspire to communicate like. And before you have the conversation with that other person, embody that character and think about how they would have that conversation. How would they have it with composure and graciousness? I don't know if you've seen that Beyonce documentary that was out a few years ago, and there was a moment where she pulled up one of her employees on how they were behaving, and the way that she did it with such dignity and composure, I was like, ooh, I need to remember that, and that is how I'm going to embody assertive communication in the future. Second bonus tip for you, always keep the bigger picture in mind. Remember that it's not you versus the other person, it's the two of you working together to achieve a big goal. So keep that big goal in mind, and you can even use that to remind the other person, remind them that you're on the same team and you're working together towards a big goal. So you're working together to serve the patients, you're working together to keep the ward running smoothly. I'm wondering if I should make this into a series of how to communicate better as a people pleaser or something like that. So let me know in the comments below if that would be helpful for you. If you haven't already, please hit the thumbs up, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss any videos from me. And if you've watched all of this video and you're thinking to yourself, I think I might be a people pleaser, then you can watch this video right here where I talk about the 7 signs of being a people pleaser. Bye guys.